Welcome everyone to 2021 RMIS Report and Beyond, a new era of risk management. Before we start with today's discussion, we have a few housekeeping items to go over first. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be sending a link to the recording, slides, and additional resources after our discussion wraps. The 2021 RMIS Report will be included as one of those resources. If you have questions for our panelists, please enter them into the question box located on your control panel. If we don't get to your question, we'll be reaching out to you afterward to get it answered. Last, we'll be popping in and out of our presentation today to focus on our panelist discussion, so the PowerPoint will be minimized during those times. Now for a look at our presenters. Today's panel is being hosted by Red Hand Advisors, which is a risk tech consulting firm and publishes the annual RMIS report. President and founder Patrick O'Neill and senior advisor David Tweedy will be moderating today's discussion. Together, Pat and Dave bring more than 6 decades of combined risk technology, claims, and insurance management experience. Bob Petrie is the CEO and founder of Origami Risk and will be providing us with a vendor perspective on today's panel. Origami is a leading provider of integrated risk and insurance SaaS solutions that includes RMIS, healthcare, EHS, GRC, claims and policy admin, and more. And finally, we have Jennifer Turner, SVP Product Manager at Gallagher Bassett, which is a global industry-leading third-party administrator. Jen will be providing us with a TPA and multi-client perspective on today's panel. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Pat, to go over our agenda and kick off our discussion.
Thanks, Courtney. I appreciate it. And welcome everyone to the webinar, and thanks for joining us today. On behalf of Red Hand Advisors, Dave and I are very pleased today to be joined by 2 of the providers in the marketplace, both organizations recognized in our most recent report as leaders in the industry. So welcome to Origami and Gallagher Bassett. Our plan today is to have a panel discussion revolving around the research and the 2021 RMIS report. We will share trends that we've seen over the past few years from our research and hear from our panelists on their perspective in the industry. Finally, we're going to share some key insights that were not in the report, so stay tuned for those at the end. Before we dive into the discussion, though, I thought it'd be helpful to understand what goes into the RMIS report. The report itself, which Dave and I published, is based on really 3 key components. First, RMIS user feedback, and probably the most important, let me mention that, which is gathered through a user survey that we performed at the beginning of the year. Over 1,100 professionals responded this year to our survey. We asked them questions not only about their RMIS experience, but also about the industry as a whole and how technology can help them do their jobs better. Second, we asked the RMIS vendors to complete an RFI, which provides key information about the solutions and what's new since last year. We had a record 30 vendors respond to our request this year. And finally, Dave and our own industry experience. Dave and I live and breathe this every single day and try to help clients with their RMIS investment. And so that's a big piece of what goes into the report. So let's dive into those findings and see what we found out. Thanks, Courtney. I appreciate it. And welcome everyone to the webinar, and thanks for joining us today. On behalf of Red Hand Advisors, Dave and I are very pleased today to be joined by 2 of the providers in the marketplace, both organizations recognized in our most recent report as leaders in the industry. So welcome to Origami and Gallagher Bassett. Our plan today is to have a panel discussion revolving around the research and the 2021 RMIS report. We will share trends that we've seen over the past few years from our research and hear from our panelists on their perspective in the industry. Finally, we're going to share some key insights that were not in the report, so stay tuned for those at the end. Before we dive into the discussion, though, I thought it'd be helpful to understand what goes into the RMIS report. The report itself, which Dave and I published, is based on really 3 key components. First, RMIS user feedback, and probably the most important, let me mention that, which is gathered through a user survey that we performed at the beginning of the year. Over 1,100 professionals responded this year to our survey. We asked them questions not only about their RMIS experience, but also about the industry as a whole and how technology can help them do their jobs better. Second, we asked the RMIS vendors to complete an RFI, which provides key information about the solutions and what's new since last year. We had a record 30 vendors respond to our request this year. And finally, Dave and our own industry experience. Dave and I live and breathe this every single day and try to help clients with their RMIS investment. And so that's a big piece of what goes into the report. So let's dive into those findings and see what we found out. It's impossible to start without talking about COVID and the impact it had on all of us for this discussion. Last year, just a month into the pandemic, we published the 2020 RMIS report. And in that report, we mentioned that the RMIS providers were already providing key solutions to respond to the pandemic, many of those free of charge to their clients. Those solutions continued to roll out through the year, and we learned from our user survey that the majority of organizations relied heavily on risk technology to respond to the crisis. Second, we saw an increase in adoption of integrated risk management strategies, as well as organizations going beyond just focusing on insurable risks. We expect this trend will continue, and our research shows that the RMIS providers are moving in that direction as well, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Our research also shows that the independent RMIS market is growing at a faster rate than we've ever seen before. Remarkably, even last year with the pandemic, RMIS vendors reported very strong results. I know from our own work with organizations, when we got through that initial pass of the pandemic and got to whatever I guess we call now the new normal, organizations realized they weren't prepared. They weren't prepared for the challenges they were facing, and technology was a key player or piece in responding to that. And finally, we were excited because we've seen so many new solutions in the marketplace. While the core RMIS space has been shrinking, the ancillary markets around that, claims, risk technology, has been growing very steadily, and we're excited about that. We're going to talk about more about in a couple minutes. But let's get some perspective from the panel. As I mentioned, the RMIS market is growing at a faster rate than ever before. Bob, is Origami seeing the same trend, and what are you hearing from your clients about their needs?
Yeah, we're absolutely seeing the same trend, Pat. The RMIS market has been growing really nicely for the last 10 years, but I would say in the last couple of years, the growth has been increasing for two reasons. One is RMIS buyers have been doing more with their systems. They've been adding new users. They've been adopting new approaches to use a RMIS to better manage risk or to collect some more information. So RMIS systems are getting deeper, are getting used more deeply, and getting embedded more deeply inside of organizations than they were 5 years ago. So RMIS vendors really haven't raised prices. You don't really see price raises much in a software business. You more see flat to down. So the increase in revenue that we're seeing is not coming from price increases. It really is coming from clients doing more with Origami than they have before. The other reason is that an increasing number of our new clients are coming to us, and they're not changing from one RMIS system to the other. They are replacing a non-RMIS, which in most cases is a spreadsheet or a series of spreadsheets that they're using to do their job with the RMIS system. So we see, for example, in recent years, over half of our RMIS buyers are coming to us from not having a system. They're first-time buyers in the industry. And I think Pat noted in the report that some of the information that he's seeing from users also indicates that a lot of them are brand new to the industry as well. So we think that the trends that we're seeing are likely coming and are true in other vendors as well. So why is this happening? The real reason it's happening is feature innovation in RMIS is undergoing a real renaissance. So if you've been involved in RMIS as long as the 60 combined years of Pat and Dave, then what you remember about RMIS systems, sorry, a little crack at Pat's age.
Appreciate that.
Pat, by the way, is the above average number. He's increasing that average across the two of them. So, Pat and I remember that RMIS systems used to be really claims oriented, really deep in pulling in loss information from different TPAs and carriers, but not much around the rest of the insurance lifecycle, policy renewal, safety, those sorts of things. And in recent years, we and our competitors have been rapidly adding new features and capabilities that round out the things that RMIS systems can do, which of course is what's driving
management arena.
Sure. Is deeper use by RMIS by existing customers, and also those new features are attracting additional people to the market. We're a big player in RMIS, and we see almost every deal. And as we look at the pipeline a little further up, which gives us visibility to the next 2 years or so, again, we see these two trends holding for quite some time.
So I see how this panel discussion is going to go. That's interesting. Thanks, Bob. Guys, we have been doing this for a long time, and RMIS has been around longer than any of us that are on the call today. But one of the things that, and I think you referenced it just a moment ago, is I think the changes in RMIS have been pretty significant, right? The increases to what it does, even just let's just say 10 years ago, there's been a pretty significant change of what, I feel like my definition of RMIS changes all the time, and it certainly has changed significantly from the early days of it being really just claims data consolidation driven. Do you think, Bob, do you think those trends will continue? Is there more to come? And what do you think clients are going to be thinking about 3 years from now, 5 years from now, from RMIS and RMIS technology?
Yeah, I think this trend is going to continue for a long time, and I think that it's an interesting question, Pat. What comes next? So if the current trend has been really a deepening and broadening of the functionality of things that a RMIS can do, the next 3 to 5 years, I think, is going to bring some different topics. That's going to continue, but I think some new things are going to emerge as well. The first one is data. So if you think about a RMIS, what a RMIS really does at its simplest level is it aggregates data from multiple sources: TPAs, carriers, brokers, spreadsheets, internal corporate financial systems, asset systems, human resource systems, et cetera. But I think the trend is going to be to increase and improve the quality and types of data coming into Origami in really a couple of categories. Richer data sets. So for example, more comprehensive data than is going in today. So we're in a partnership with a company called LineSlip, doing a fantastic job and working with us. And they can bring in 150 elements of data from your binder, which is much more than most people are typing in manually themselves. So that's one example out of, I think, of dozens of places where our clients are going to work with us and with external parties to bring in deeper and more information than they had before. Higher quality. Some of the data that's flowing into Origami and our competitor systems isn't that great, but the source systems are being upgraded and improved, and I think we're going to see better data coming in. Frequency is a topic that is often with data. So, the most recent 5 years or so has brought really a change from people bringing in data monthly into claims data monthly into Origami to daily. And I think the trend over the next 3 to 5 years is to move from daily feeds to real-time feeds. So you don't have to wait till that night to figure out what happened that day. You're getting those reserve changes and payments and new claims happening sort of on the fly. And a couple more, but I'll give you one of the last, just in saving time. Mobile devices are dramatically increasing the amount of data that can be captured, because it's capturing data at incidents and events, photographs, transcripts, witness reports, all those sorts of things that really wasn't part of a RMIS system before, but because everybody has a cell phone and RMIS systems are connected to cell phones in sort of some interesting ways, we're going to get a lot more data sort of from the field added to the system. So, certainly one big topic is data. The second one that I would talk about is ecosystem. So a RMIS is really the single source of truth inside the risk management department. It contains all the information, the latest information, all reconciled and tied and connected together. But there still are silos between insured and broker and insurance company, where they're both working on their own sort of silos of data. And I think there's going to be some interest in the next 3 to 5 years at figuring out how to get everybody involved in placing an insurance policy or identifying the cost of risk to be using the same set of systems and the same sets of data, with access rights controlled in a way that means that people can only see and use the information that they can. But it means that you're not sort of making copies out of a RMIS and putting it in a spreadsheet that is out of date by definition. The second that spreadsheet's connected, you're all working off the same live, real-time set of data. And the third trend, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, is a breakdown in the risk silos, meaning dealing with compliance risk in one place, dealing with insurable risk in another part of the organization, insurable risk, uninsurable risk that can't be insured someplace else. Those are all silos, and I think the trend is going to be towards a more holistic view and vision of managing risk across all those silos, and that's going to be a topic that customers are going to talk with us about and our competitors, and we're going to have to think hard about how we do that. It's a topic we've already begun thinking about, and a topic that clients have already begun discussing with us, but I think that trend is going to accelerate from here.
Thanks, Bob. I think those are pretty interesting, and I think there's probably things that we aren't thinking about today that are probably going to be on the horizon in the next 3 to 5 years. Really, it just depends on where the world takes us.
Yeah, I mean, nobody, if you go look back at sci-fi movies from 20 years ago or older, nobody was walking around with a phone in their hand, right? So it's the things we can't imagine that I think are going to surprise us. But these are just what we can see right here. But I'm sure you're right. There's going to be new things that aren't even on this list that will emerge.
Yeah. So we touched on some of the general trends that from the report, and I kind of dove in and with Bob's help just now talked about some of the trends we're seeing in what I call the independent market. But Dave, could you touch on some of the more the trends specific to the bundled market, and maybe for clarification, since I didn't do it yet, is tell folks what we really mean by we use it in the report, bundled versus unbundled, or in this case, independent providers.
Sure, Pat, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the terminology of bundled versus unbundled goes back to the first report that I put together in '85. I don't even want to remember back that far, but we had to have some sort of a differentiation between those vendors that provided systems that were portable, and regardless of where the client went, that system would go with them, versus the bundled market, which basically is if you're with a broker or a TPA or an insurance company, you can use their system as long as you're, a client of theirs. So that's where that comes from. So the 2020, the pandemic really changed a whole lot of stuff. I'm sure that's kind of been used so many times in the last year. But one thing that was interesting is that the investment in the RMIS in the RMIS products also is true in the bundle side. Maybe the insurers, with one exception, the travelers, they really continued to do a lot of investment, and that showed if you look at the report. The rest of the insurance industry kind of, at least the ones that we've been tracking, kind of remained flat. The brokers becoming more and more part. Ironically, the brokers were the big, remember Bob, the brokers were the big, owners of RMIS spec, 10, 15 years ago. Now that's no longer the case. Now the brokers are starting to look, oh, well, we really need a RMIS to talk to our clients. So maybe we should tap a partner like an unbundled RMIS provider. And I know, Jen and Bob will get into that a little bit later on.
And Dave, just on the broker side, one of the things that's interesting, it's a different approach, right? Because
AI is huge. All
the independents were technically owned by two of the largest brokers.
True.
Now what we're seeing is the brokers are offering a bundled solution, right? Something that goes along with as being the broker, where previously those were independent. They might have contained some extra data from the broker, but they really stood alone and competed independently.
Yeah, that's good clarification, Pat. Yeah. The TPA space, however, had the most interesting activity of last year. We just saw across the board increased investment by the TPAs as they responded to their client needs. And not just that, but also across the board improvements in their client satisfaction. So that I think is a tribute to how fast the TPAs mobilized and how much they realized that technology is really an answer here. And specifically, at least right now, there is only one bundled solution that we kind of call hybrid, which is kind of the best of both worlds of solid claims focus, claims management, claims administration by the TPA, but also starting to introduce risk management functionality as part of that hybrid solution. And that would be Gallagher Bassett's Luminos. So far, they're the only hybrid around, but Pat and I kind of think that that's not going to be for long. There's going to be increasing number of competitors that'll be going into that space. But that's why I thought it was a very exciting last year for the bundled space. So that's a segue. I want to talk to Jen about the hybrid solution, and specifically, Jen, what is Luminos providing? What is Gallagher Bassett using Luminos for to meet the needs of their client base?
Sure, Dave, thanks so much. And we're very excited to be the pioneer of the hybrid solution, as you so eloquently described. So through our partnership with Origami Risk, Gallagher Bassett has created this hybrid RMIS solution. It puts together the Origami Risk platform with the intellectual capital and data analysis that comes from our TPA service model, right? So our solution, Luminos, offers our clients full visibility from the incident intake all the way through the life of the claim, while delivering a truly unique outcomes-focused offering. So we took the Origami Risk toolset and we built it out with our best possible outcomes analysis, claim analytics, benchmarking capabilities. We focused our GB claim expertise and data science resources to build out and integrate our proprietary intellectual capital into the product. We support program performance transparency, and we draw from our repository, as you mentioned, Dave, of total cost of risk management expertise and outcomes analytics across the expansive array of global coverages and exposures that we manage and allow our clients to manage through Luminos. And this is why our clients are so very excited about the Luminos product. Bottom line, our global risk management clients, carriers, and captives benefit from the perfected interface between claims and risk management and the availability and quality of data that Luminos provides. Bob mentioned the quality and the more available data, and that's definitely what we're seeing and providing through Luminos. The partnership allows GB to provide a turnkey RMIS solution supported by our best practice implementation training and client service programs. And guess what, Dave? Luminos is available on day one of the program with Gallagher Bassett. For those clients who need more specialized functionality, workflow, data, we are readily customizing Luminos for those purposes. So really, the Luminos value proposition has been incredibly well received because it alleviates the need for our clients to make the investment of time and money to stand up their own solution.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jen. So Dave referenced a moment ago, he's been doing some variation of this report back to 1985. I've had the pleasure of working with Dave on the report for the past 4 years under the name RMIS Report. And one of the real interesting things to me that we're starting to be able to do right now, we've standardized the questions that we ask the users during the survey process. And while they changed this year, we added questions about COVID and the pandemic and how people responded. There's a core set of questions that we ask every year. And so one of the things we can do now is look at trends over those years. So it's been about 4 years. We have 4 years of data, and a couple things jump out that I think are pretty interesting that I'd like to talk about, and then also get some feedback from the panel. The first trend, and we can only go back to 4 years, but I do think it's kind of a hockey stick approach. I think there's been an increase in this for a lot of time, but I think in the last couple of years, it's been a pretty significant uptick, is the increase in the average number of users within an organization. So the average is up. But even more interesting than that, the number of organizations that report having more than 500 users on their system is up over 80% in 4 years. So that tells me a couple things. One, it tells me we need to add another category to our survey so that we can see where we're going. It's 500 and above is kind of the way we capture it. So next year, we're going to add another category and see where that trend is going. But I think a lot of it has to do with some of the things we've already touched on. Much of it has to do with accessibility of technology, right? The ability to, systems are more cost effective. I think, Bob, you mentioned that the costs haven't been increasing, but the capabilities are. I think, but it also reflects how these systems are being used today, how they're being used within organizations. There's no need, if you were just doing core capabilities of a RMIS, to have 500 users if you're doing just consolidation of data and claims management from your TPAs. So that's one big point, really interesting, and I think we're going to see that to continue. Another point we're seeing is much higher utilization of, I guess, what I would consider kind of the next set of key functions. When we talk about RMIS, we always start with claims, and it's always been at a very high utilization rate. It's very infrequent that you find organizations that don't use it for some type of claims management or claims administration capabilities. It's always surprised me, though, how many people don't actually utilize more of the functionality that's been available, whether that's today with all the functionality we're talking about, or even 5 or 10 years ago. Very not limited, but not really to the extent you would expect to see those capabilities being used. But over the last couple years, we're actually seeing a pretty healthy increase in that next tier. So things like incident intake, exposure collection, managing renewal activities, just to name a few. And if you think about all of those lead to needing more people to be participating in the use of the system, collecting data, reporting claims, etc. So that's a trend we're seeing. And kind of along those same lines, we're seeing a pretty good increase in utilization of capabilities that didn't exist or wouldn't be considered part of a RMIS 5 or 10 years ago. Enterprise risk management, governance, risk and compliance capabilities, environmental health and safety, all things that have had standalone. There's been standalone capabilities in that area for many, many years, but we're seeing a blend of that in the RMIS space. And they're obviously not at the same adoption level of some of the other things we're talking about, but the fact is they're growing at a quicker rate. And I guess we expect that growth will continue to outpace many of the other features. I think we're going to be talking in a few years from now, and those functions that I just mentioned are going to be more standard capabilities. We won't even remember that times when it wasn't part of the system. So, Bob, how's Origami seeing these? Are you seeing the same trends in terms of these new capabilities? And how are you guys responding to your clients if that is what you're seeing?
Yeah, we're absolutely seeing a trend and an interest in new capabilities. So one example, sort of before we even get to GRC or safety or healthcare risk management, is COVID. So more than 200 of our clients adopted one of our COVID solutions that we spun up in a couple of weeks last spring. So is that traditionally insurable risk? Is that something that a risk management department deals with or dealt with before? No. But we had a very fast and very capable and very inexpensive tool that we could spin up for our clients. And so they moved and are using Origami to do something outside of RMIS with just that one example alone. But more broadly, sort of back to Pat's question, risk is a broad topic, and RMIS has dealt mostly with insurable risk over its history. But if I'm right, and I'm not the only one saying this, I don't think I'm out on a limb. I think lots of people are sort of looking and seeing this. Risk is going to be thought of and understood more holistically. They're not going to think about it in silos anymore. And why is this happening? This is really a guess, but I think that really three large and unexpected and world-changing events in the last 20 years have really sort of focused attention on the fact that you can't just look forward and predict and see what risk is going to be. It happens without much warning. So those three large events were 9/11, the financial crisis of 2008, and the pandemic. So three large transformative events that obviously were not foreseen before. And I think those, along with just a general trend towards using data and systems and technology to solve business problems and analyze information much more quickly, are what really is driving this. So we and I think most of the market sees safety and GRC and RMIS all coming together, and the goal is how to measure, mitigate, and manage risk, regardless of whether you can insure it or not, and a focus on mitigation, right? Because it doesn't matter whether you insure something or not, you're still going to pay for it either through a premium or through a direct cost, one way or the other. So the fact these systems can be used to drive down the cost of risk at companies in a holistic way, I think it's a trend that's going to be with us for quite some time. And like the COVID solution, one of the solutions that we are cross-selling to our clients most effectively right now is our ERM solution, followed closely by some safety and some other GRC solutions. So we're seeing it in the market as well as trying to understand it theoretically.
Thanks, Bob. I think the RMIS space kind of drives a couple different ways. To your comments just now, a lot of it's driven by events that take place or what risk management is focused on. But technology has a part in that too, and sometimes technology helps make some of those changes. We've seen a lot of those changes having pretty significant effect in the claim space and the risk and insurance industry, and some pretty exciting things we saw in this cycle of the report, seeing particularly some new vendors and some new ideas and new innovation. So Dave, can you comment maybe on some of, just using claims as an example, the impact we're seeing with technology, or maybe the potential impact technology can have in the claims management arena?
Sure, Pat. Yeah, so to start this out, I'll bore you again by going back in history. Back in the late 70s, when I started out as a fledgling claims adjuster for Liberty Mutual, I walked into a completely manual system. There was no computers. I think only the mainframes up in Portsmouth carried key information on policyholders and so forth, but everything was manual. Even Bob was kidding me before this seminar took place, is just how I had to write signed statements. And people out there, you know what a signed statement is? You have to write longhand, and it's not good if you have an awful handwriting like me. At any rate, so a tremendous focus on manual activities. And over the years, as you look at claims systems develop, and certainly the folks on the phone, the two vendors that we have on our panel today can go into that in more detail, but you are seeing the claim life cycle from inception all the way through resolution and all parts in between are being dealt with now by technology, and especially over the past few years. And we saw some really interesting things last year, such as in the inception, artificial intelligence being built into some of these systems that would basically eliminate manual intervention, which is where a lot of mistakes are made in claim inception. I don't know how many times I've had to go back, when I was an adjuster or a claim auditor at Deloitte, to go in and fix mistakes during the intake process because they just got the claimant name wrong, they got the incident wrong, they got a lot of things wrong. So if we can eliminate that up front, that's going to reduce the number of manual errors. So AI is huge all the way through the product. Advanced analytics, it's something I know Jen is going to comment on a little bit after my little soliloquy here. But advanced analytics, not just retrospective, which has always been a hallmark of the RMIS, even back into the 90s, but now prospective or predictive analytics that look forward based upon data points that Bob was talking about earlier. And that is really changing how reserves are set. It's changing how adjusters and claim professionals focus early on in a claim if it's going to be a problem claim. And that's just what all insurance companies, claims departments, and TPAs or self-administered organizations want to solve as fast as they can. They want to get the resources on it as fast as possible. And the last area that we saw is the introduction now of low code / no code software, which addresses some of the gaffes and the problems that come with legacy-based systems. And everyone on the phone, everyone on this panel here, I can say all of the problems we had to deal with in changing, integrating with a legacy-based system, with a RMIS. So a low-code, no-code solution is starting to eliminate that by introducing APIs. So it's a much easier and seamless way of integrating with other functions. So that's really exciting. We're looking forward to more of these developments as we go forward. And also, as Bob had said, the introduction of more risk management functionality. Technologies have an incredible impact on that right now. And that kind of goes back to my discussion with Jen earlier about hybrid. So Jen, historically, as we know, bundle solutions have focused mostly on claims. Tell me how that's changed and what GB is doing to address these needs.
Well, first of all, and very importantly, I am nowhere near as old as you and Pat. I had to go to your archives to read those old RMIS reports. Okay, so RMIS products, similar to what you just stated about claim products back in the day, Dave, RMIS products just simply did not exist to do what they can do today. Much of the focus in the historical sense was on rudimentary claims management and what I like to call after-the-fact claims reporting, such as loss runs, right? So with the maturing of both disciplines, risk and claims management, that focus has shifted to outcomes improvement and program performance. In a nutshell, our clients are very focused on running their core business, and they expect us to manage their program to the best possible outcomes. That's our core business. Much more fun to focus on what you can change versus what has already happened and is locked down in time, right? Okay, so now for my favorite stuff, story time. So we have partnered with a number of GB clients to implement customized Luminos product solutions that did not exist back in the days that Dave was talking to. And these solutions have been able to meet their risk management challenges. I'm going to share a few here today, just examples of what we can do with Luminos, our hybrid solution. Let's start with incident management at the top of the food chain. One of our clients, a very large telecom infrastructure client, had disparate risk and safety solutions. They had their employees rekeying incidents into both solutions. And as we all know, that creates data latency and quality issues. As well, it's an inefficient use of staff. So we created a customized Luminos workflow solution to automate and consolidate incident management activities and ended up delivering an enterprise risk and safety solution used by both teams. Our implementation eliminated the client data entry rework, consolidated the information into a single repository, and included the implementation, Bob mentioned this a few minutes ago, of APIs for first reports of injury that are real-time flowing into the Gallagher Bassett claim adjudication solution. we're very excited about this. We've seen a lot of other clients show interest in this workflow and integrated solution. And at the bottom line, the client was able to repurpose the key employees to do more strategic analysis on the program versus rekeying data into multiple products. Next up, property renewals. A Fortune 150 restaurant client of ours came to us with a very manually intensive global property renewal that was taking them and their global broker 3 months every year to manage. The process was being done through spreadsheets, and data quality was a clear concern. Also, the time that was spent on the data collection. We created a Luminos-based global property values collection solution. This allowed for the entry of required renewal data across the world in over 90 countries in local language and currency. We were able to reduce the cycle time down from 3 months to 2 weeks and greatly improve the quality of the data, which positively impacted the client's renewal process. Hot topic, integrated disability management. A large private food distribution GB client had disparate disability and work comp solutions, different partners on the program, but needed an integrated view to total absence management. So they wanted to see this employees on work comp, but they were also on military leave and FEMLA, etc. Luminos was able to come together and deliver dashboards and views for their occupational and non-occupational data, allowing for better analysis of total absence management across the employee base. I can't leave out exposure-driven total cost of risk allocations, right, Bob? One of our favorite things in RMIS land, and they are not one size fits all. I don't think I've ever seen one that looked even 80% like the prior. So we had a client in our religious sector, a global client that had a very intensive spreadsheet manual process involving many, many data points, different assets, et cetera, and complex calculations used to determine chargebacks within their organization. We worked hard with this client and their broker, and we were able to put together an integrated solution in Luminos that allowed for all of the data points to be housed in our modules and all of the calculations and formulas. And bottom line, we were essentially able to create invoices that they could shoot out to the rest of the organization. The last one that I'm going to share today is really a matter of packaging versus product development. Here at Gallagher Bassett, we have large books of business focused on specific industry sectors. I've worked with my team, and we've worked together with the GB industry groups to partner up examples in the religious, non-for-profit sector, retail, restaurant, and public entity. And what we've done is put together meaningful dashboards, widgets, data elements, searches that resonate for those books of business and those clients. Puts together a very quick turnkey solution that can be speed to market for these clients. In some cases, we put in additional modules and capabilities such as risk and property appraisals or specialized COPE that resonates for, let's say, a religious client. These are just a few of the examples that Luminos has brought to our clients and the marketplace, and we are just getting started.
Thanks, Jen.
Back to you.
Yep. I want to just remind everyone that if you have questions for the panel, you can enter them in the question section on the control panel. We're going to get to them in just a couple seconds, but I did promise that we'd share some insights that were not actually in the report that came from our research and specifically from our user survey. So we don't publish everything we find in the report. It's almost impossible to do that. We probably will share some of this in a future article or white paper, but we thought it would be helpful to share it with the group today. So a couple things that jumped out to us one of the things we didn't share. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen an increase in RMIS uses across the board, whether that's from COVID or increased usage in other capabilities. But one of the things we also heard, and pretty resoundingly, is that a majority of organizations still believe they need to invest more in risk technology. So even with the deeper usage of capabilities and the uptick we saw last year in particular, the number of users, all the things we referred to already, organizations believe they need to invest more in risk technology. So that's a good thing. I think it's been something that I think has lagged behind for many, many years. In fact, another question we asked that goes kind of hand in hand with those results is we asked what organizations were thinking about for their budgets and their spending on risk technology and what it would look like in 2021. The survey was performed the first part of January. And on average, organizations said they would be up, their spending would be up in risk technology by 10% year over year. Now, some of that may have to do with a downturn potentially in what they spent last year because of the pandemic, although we've seen references in many cases to organizations saying they did more with technology. So whichever way you look at it, a 10% increase in a technology spend is pretty significant. And so I think that shows that not only are people realizing they need to do more, but they're actually planning to do more. So I think we're going to see a lot more exciting things coming from the vendors and to the vendors, which ultimately I think help everyone in this community. Another really interesting point, and Bob referenced it a moment ago or at the beginning, if we look at kind of the organizations that responded and said they were implemented, say in the last, I think it's the last 3 years is my calculation, a third of the folks that were implemented in the last 3 years were brand new RMIS users and RMIS buyers. So organizations for the first time using the system. And that's fantastic. I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think the tools are getting a whole lot easier to use. They're more cost effective. But I also think that the increase in risk awareness and risk management is driving that. Organizations that never used a RMIS in the past are now for the first time using systems. So that's really interesting. The last one I want to touch on, and I guess it was so hidden, we decided not even to put it on the slide, which is we asked a question if you were more interested in having one solution to solve all your problems, or were you looking for kind of best in breed and use multiple systems? And we've seen a trend in this question, actually, if you look back 4 or 5 years ago, it's actually moved in a different direction. People tended to prefer one solution. We're hearing now people wanting best in breed. They want to be able, they want to have solutions that meet all of their needs. I guess there is one caveat to that. The caveat is they want these systems to integrate and to speak to each other. And so that's the trend that I think people are looking for. They want the best of both worlds. And we've seen one-off solutions in the marketplace for many, many years. Many of those become standard features in RMIS over time. But in the past few years, there's been a pretty significant increase in these one-off type solutions, kind of risk technology, risk tech solutions. And so much so, we added a whole section to the report this year and highlighted a number of those solutions, which hopefully people find valuable. But historically, these third-party, these one-off solutions didn't integrate with the core system people use, the RMIS, and partnerships with RMIS. But I think that's starting to change. Bob, I see that from Origami. That's certainly changing. You referenced line slip a moment ago, and I know there's others. How are you guys approaching partnerships? And I think even more importantly, how do they benefit the customers?
Well, they benefit the customers. So a RMIS again is basically the ability to gather data from lots of different disparate sources and put it all into a relational database, and then perform analytics and analysis on top of that. So what partnerships bring is other data and other tools that can manipulate that data. So what it really lets you do is to extend additional functionality that has been generated from the incredible amount of entrepreneurship and innovation that's happening in the insurtech space right now. It really is amazing to watch. There's more entrepreneurs in this market than at any time that I've been in this business. And what they're doing is they're creating sort of best in breed or point solutions, but they're building them in such a way that can be easily integrated in into systems like Origami through an API. Primarily, it's the best technology to do things like that. So what it lets us and our customers do easily is extend functionality that might be beneficial to just a small subset of our client base, 5%, 10%, whatever the number is, maybe just one, but do it in a way that's very efficient for us and very efficient for our customers. So we think that's a trend that's going to continue. And what we're doing at Origami is we're going to step up our pace in terms of looking for valuable partnership that we think our customers would benefit from as well than we have before, because there's more possibilities in the market.
Thanks, Bob. Jen, just in general around some of these trends that I'm seeing or we're seeing in the report, what are you seeing at Gallagher in terms of first-time users, increased usage by organizations, spend to some degree? I mean, how do you see it from the TPA point of view?
Very much the same, Pat. We too have seen tremendous increase in first-time RMIS buyers, RMIS upsells, and client adoption of Luminos. year over year, we've seen exponential growth, but really during 2020 and continuing into this year, we have experienced our largest ever RMIS deals, and it's in the form of what I've described in my storytelling there, the enterprise risk and safety solutions, and where we're actually replacing internal disparate systems that clients have homegrown. And so we attribute this to the fact that our new normal, as you guys defined earlier, I like to use that word too, it requires secure cloud-based solutions that are accessible from anywhere and provide that integrated one-stop shop solution, right? Because we haven't been in the office doing renewals with our file cabinet. So we've needed more technology, even if claim volumes were a little bit down at the beginning of the pandemic. Now more than ever, the clients are having to do more with less, and they need innovation. To illustrate this point, at the beginning of the pandemic, our clients were experiencing fewer claims as their employees were remote and they were not at full operational capacity. Gallagher Bassett anticipated this potential, and our first priority was to put together a dedicated team of COVID-19 GB resolution managers to manage all the COVID claims, including contact tracing solutions. Our clients asked also for new analytic tools, and Luminos rose to that challenge and provided program-wide views of relevant claims, incident counts, hotspot, outbreak, location tracking, and the ability to track applicable COVID testing results. Pat, we know you're wondering how this can all be possible. Well, let's look at the bigger picture.
Possible?
Yes, thank you, Pat. I knew you wanted to know. We are an industry leader handling roughly 15% of all work comp claims in the U.S. About 50% of our global book, however, is liability, significant population in complex specialty liability, cyber, product, professional, all available in Luminos. What presentation doesn't include a few factoids? Well, we host over 24 million claims, 590 million notes, and this is for approximately 7,400 active clients, and that's accounts, not users. Most importantly, we are humbled by our clients' turnout in the RMIS Report customer survey that you mentioned at the very beginning, and we are thrilled to have received the highest Net Promoter Score for the 4th year in a row. Thank you very much to our loyal, valued clients. We are here for you.
Thanks, Jen. We're going to get some questions, and we've gotten a bunch in. Apologies if I'm looking to the left. I've got the questions up here on another screen, and we've got some good ones, some quick ones as well. So let's see. I'm going to surprise everyone. We'll dive right in. Really good question here. Let me see if I'll go back to the one that I wanted to start with. So Bob, this one's directed to you, but Jen, you may have some input on this as well. The customization that Jen mentioned that's been done in GB, property renewals, allocations, is this available in Origami for non-GB clients? And whoever wrote it, Jen wrote, sorry, Jen. They probably not a GB client at the moment, but how do you guys handle that? The innovation that's going on, I guess, in both organizations.
Yeah, so Origami is an incredibly configurable platform. And if you think about it, we've got clients from every industry that are using the system, and they're solving problems in different ways because of the demands and needs of their own organization. So what Gallagher Bassett's using is using those same configuration tools to decide, working with the customer, exactly how to deploy that functionality to that customer. They do it inside of Luminos, and we do the same thing inside of Origami.
Excellent. That kind of goes hand in hand with another question. So Jen, this one I'll direct it to you. So if I'm a Gallagher Bassett client, and what would the pros and cons be if I was deciding between using Luminos and using Origami?
We get that question a lot, Pat, and the answer is really the same whether the client is looking at using Origami or any standalone independent RMIS solution. It really boils down to Gallagher Bassett. We are a claims company. That is what we do. We're not here to deploy software solutions. However, we do augment our claims and superior outcomes with innovative technology, as we've discussed here today. So what we start with when we get this question is really suggesting a discovery workshop with the client or the carrier. And through those conversations, we're able to line out what the needs are and determine the applicable, if it's a good fit for Luminos, quite frankly. We view ourselves as trusted advisors when we're doing this, and many times we will recommend Red Hand advisors for a truly objective opinion, particularly if the client's deciding bundled, unbundled, or which provider within the space. Given that we're the hybrid sitting in between, we have a little bit of a different niche. But again, we're looking for the right solution for that client, as is Bob. And Bob and I have had an agreement forever that we do the right thing for the client. It's the right thing for all of us. And I think that has held true. What I would say the main differentiators as to what I generally tell a client or prospect is that if you want control, and you mentioned portability, you want to be able to take that solution as is with you, regardless of what happens with your insurance or your claim handling. You want to make a change, but you don't want to change your RMIS, then potentially you need to consider an independent software solution. However, with that comes the full implementation, project management, decisions, configuration, administration. On the flip side, for Gallagher Bassett Luminos clients, it's obviously a multi-tenant environment. I gave you some of the volume statistics. That was actually helpful, right? Because we've got many, many clients living together, and we must uphold their data access privacy requirements as well as audit standards. What that means is we cannot turn over security administration, configuration, and uploading data to any client because it would not be acceptable for all clients. So we manage that through the Luminos team here at Gallagher Bassett. So generally, the client makes a decision, in my opinion. Bob, you might want to jump in on this, as to whether they want to do the administration. They want to configure it specifically. They have very extensive workflow. They're going to load in 1 million, data records on a very frequent basis. These typically would not be good fits for Luminos. But the devil's in the details, and until we sit down and do that discovery workshop, we really don't know. But we're very transparent through the process. And there's times when we bring Bob's team in and we work through it together. Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's really right. So, the dimensions are price. Luminos is going to be less expensive than a direct Origami relationship. Independence, I think Jen mentioned that well. If you buy from Origami, it's a portable system. With Luminos, it's part of the package of solutions you get from doing business with the great Gallagher Bassett. Control, a few more elements of control in terms of configuring your own product and moving your own data in. Those really are the three drivers. And again, as Jen said, what we're interested in doing is making sure clients get to the right solution. We often have clients looking at both and then deciding at the end.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Jen. Great answers. Dave, one for us. What type? I think one for us. I'd ask Bob, but he'd probably lowball the answer. So we'll answer it. It looks like a first-time user potentially. What type of return on investment should I expect or plan for if I invest in a RMIS? You want to start?
Sure. That question has been popped to me for the last 20 some years. Every time someone's thinking, I'm sure for you too, Pat, since getting into the systems space. Typically it's 3 to 5 years you show a break even, but I have to say that recent experience shows me it's earlier than that. You can actually do it in less than 3 years, specifically depending on what it is you want the RMIS to do for you. If there's a lot of efficiency that's going to be generated by eliminating a lot of other systems such as Excel and some other systems you're dealing with, and you're dealing specifically with the RMIS, you're going to be able to cut down your expenses and increase your efficiency and identify ways of saving money through the system, especially with the technology and the analytics that are being touted today, at least by the two experts we have here and throughout the industry, are the ones that we track. Pat, what would you say?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think part of it is being driven. I do think that there is a quicker return. And I think a lot of that has to do with technology, with the integrations that we've talked about, things that while a RMIS had the potential to have a return on investment over some period of time, that we're doing more things now that we couldn't do 5 years ago. And I think that's driving. I don't know, Bob, do you have, other than its return on investment is immediate, I mean, would you say that's a fair statement that in a couple years, that's where people should be measuring it?
Yeah, and I think it's happening. I think it's happening faster because of feature innovation. So, you know, if what a RMIS could mainly do is analyze loss trends and give you some ideas about where to reduce expenses, that's one thing. But with all these feature enhancements, we've added on a whole other topics that essentially are huge people saving and therefore cost saving exercises. So I'll give you one very simple example very quickly: values collection. If you're a large complex organization, collecting your property values for renewal every year can take months, quarters. One of our early clients that adopted this solution basically took a year. They spent half a year collecting property values, the other half of the year collecting casualty values. Spreadsheets, manual data error, multiple manual reach outs to the field, difficulty with, you know, what if one person knows one number and somebody else knows the other three? How do you handle that and break that apart? Very complicated. So you adopt Origami for values collection. You can take basically one FTE and reduce it to a negligible amount of hours once you get the process set up and automated to run. So it's both a combination of being able to see things and therefore save costs, save injuries, save money, which is really the traditional return on investment, plus the incredible return on leverage of people's time from moving from very manual processes to automated process, so people can spend their time on business activities, not routine data collection.
And just the same thing with cost of risk allocation too, Bob. I mean, I've had a client that years ago where they were spending hours and hours and hours every quarter to try and allocate their expenses out to the field, and getting a RMIS in to do that in a matter of a minute or two.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I told those two stories, because those are, I think, some of the most labor intensive and, quite frankly, really easy opportunities for any of the RMIS providers that are here on the panel today, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Agreed. I think we have time for one more, and it reminded me that I might have skipped over a bullet earlier in one of the slides. Someone asked, how is private equity impacting the RMIS market? I'd love to get some additional perspective. Let me make a couple comments on that first. And it was one of the trends that we've noticed over many years, not just from obviously not from the survey. If you look back a couple years, 4 years, there was no real PE investment in the RMIS sector, although there was in the insurance sector and in TPA. And as we've all talked about, and Bob mentioned specifically a few moments ago, you know, the entrepreneurial increase in kind of the risk tech space is pretty amazing, whether it's PE or other investment. There's a significant amount of that going on, and it's bringing tons of innovation into the space. And that 4 years has changed. In 4 years, we now, and I think in that first report, we might have referenced the potential of a sale of one of the vendors at that time. 4 years passed, and in 2021, all of the largest players in the RMIS space all have PE investment at some degree. Some more than others. And so there's been pretty significant. And I think big picture, it creates fantastic innovation and opportunity for bringing great solutions to the market. Bob, you live and breathe this as a vendor who has a PE investment. Maybe what's the perspective from your point of view, and how does it impact clients?
Yeah, so that's the really important question right there. So private equity again is really been a good thing for the American economy. It's, from the perspective of running a growing business, it's been really interesting to watch how dynamic and efficient private equity is in getting capital to businesses that need it. But think about the difference between a startup that needs expertise and money to take a good idea and commercialize it and bring it to scale, right? That's important to
very manually intensive
world all up, right? Great companies, down the list. We all know who they are. We're founded and supported by venture capital and by private equity. But that's different than sort of the cycle once a company is mature and doesn't need money to grow. And then what happens is private equity buys, they own the business for 3 years, and then they need to sell. And so, and if that process happens over and over again, what you really see is sort of a boom and bust of investment. You see money going in up front, and then you see a real focus towards the back end of that investment on just moving the profits up so that business can be sold for the highest dollar. So, and then we're seeing some of that in the RMIS space, and that really is in a contrast to our strategy, where we're trying to build a great company And so there's no cycle of transactions that happen over time that we think is really detrimental to clients getting value out of the system. As we look at the clients that are moving to us from our competitors, the main reason they're moving is customer service dissatisfaction and lack of R&D investment in their products. And I personally think that both of those things are part of the starve the business to increase the profits at the end of the tail of when that private equity wants to own that company and moves to the sale phase.
Don't you think that at the other side of that cycle, there's the potential for the investment, and certainly I don't love cycles like that, but more investment in the product and the people in the business as private equity purchases take place?
Well, look at the RMIS industry, and I won't name names, but the easiest place to invest money for a private equity company is to buy another company, right? There's financial arbitrage in that. You buy a company at a smaller multiple, you put it together, and you can sell the whole thing together for a bigger multiple. It's just 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 3 or it equals 4. That's PE math. But that's different than investing in a core product or service that actually adds value. That's different than putting money into actually integrating those two products together so they work efficiently and well together. And that's what private equity done wrong is not doing a good job of.
Well, hopefully we'll continue to see more innovation, because I think all the pieces around this space, it's been exciting. I've always kind of had this feeling in my head about being in the risk technology space of it always kind of lagging behind other industries in terms of technology and innovation. And I certainly think it's making some great strides over the last couple of years. So we're right on time. We're right on the top of the hour. And so I want to thank everyone, Dave, the rest of the panel, Dave, Jen, Bob, thanks very much. Thanks for the little jabs at me and my age and Dave's. And I particularly thank everyone who participated and stuck with us for the hour. You'll get if you're on this call or registered, you'll get a link to this, get a copy of the slides, as well as a link to where you can download the RMIS report. If you haven't downloaded already, there's lots of great information in that report. So I hope you found today valuable, and thanks again for attending.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.